To the supporters of the national government, they saw it as being necessary to defend the power and the authority of the government. Now, ultimately, we suggested that the ideological differences between Hamilton and Jefferson become kind of the basis for political factions. Yes, political factions emerge over Hamilton's financial policies, but eventually the political parties that arise, the Federalist Party and the Republican Party, are rooted in the ideological differences between Hamilton and Jefferson. Now, central to those differences was the ideas that both men had about the people, the masses, the people. What did Jefferson think, Jessica Cole, about the people?
That they could run.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. You said this so they could run. Go ahead. Continue.
That they could have influence, should have influence in their government.
Yeah, so dear Jessica, Jefferson is sort of having a confidence in the people. That the masses, the people, were capable of understanding issues and contributing to government, and the will and the desire of the people was worthy of sort of execution. That you can trust the people. They'll do what's right. Now, Hamilton was suspicious of the people. The people are easily swayed. They are emotional. They are passionate. In some cases, they're ignorant. And a demagogue, a dictator, can easily come in and manipulate them to seize power. And so, to some extent, Hamilton envisioned the government that was insulated from the people. Whereas Jefferson envisioned a government that was responsive to the people. And then their ideological differences come from there. Because of that, Jefferson advocated a strict interpretation of the Constitution. Hamilton, a loose interpretation of the Constitution. Jefferson feared a big army and a big navy, particularly a big army that could be used by government to oppress, like the Whiskey Rebellion. Hamilton thought that a big army was necessary in order to keep order and stability. So the differences between these two people emanate from their differences over how they viewed the nature of human beings. Now, the differences between Hamilton and Jefferson, between Federalists and Republicans, certainly emerge because of domestic policies. But they are very much solidified because of foreign affairs, mainly the French Revolution. What we suggested is that France, the French Revolution starts in Washington's first administration, 1789, and when it does begin, Americans of all political persuasions are fairly supportive of France. Their revolution seems to be similar to our own. They are, casting off the shackles of a monarch and, attempting eventually to promote self-rule and eventually republicanism. But quickly, the Federalists cool on the French Revolution, largely because when it becomes violent in the Reign of Terror, the Federalists kind of see this as the excesses of the mob. If you give the people too much control, this is the kind of chaos that ensues. Heads roll in the streets. The Republicans defend the French Revolution as being sort of excessive at times, but necessary in order to break the power of oppression. And so the differences over the French Revolution really solidify sort of political thinking in the United States. Now those differences come to a head when France and England go to war in 1793. And France has an expectation that the United States would honor its treaty obligations to support them in case of war with England. The United States chooses not to do that. What does Washington do? What does Washington do in terms of the war between France and England that comes out of the French Revolution? The United States, we discussed, had a treaty obligation to assist the French in such a war. Despite that treaty obligation, Millay, what does Washington do? What is his response to that? He proclaims unilaterally neutrality. So the United States is neutral in this war. What is the domestic response to that? Lucy, what do people inside America say about Washington's proclamation of neutrality? Yes, Republicans are upset by that. They think that we should support the French. It is our moral and treaty obligation. The Federalists are relieved. Who does the neutrality benefit more initially, France or England? Who does that neutrality benefit more initially? Washington proclaims the United States neutral. France is maybe upset, but what do they quickly discover, the French? That the neutrality tends to benefit them more than England. In response to that, what does England do? We are neutral, we trade with the French. What does England do in response to the fact that France tends to benefit more from that than Britain? Yes. Yes, the British begin to violate our neutrality by seizing ships in the Caribbean, impressing sailors, and we said that this made it very difficult for Washington, because the Republicans cried for war. We have to defend our honor. We have to protect our neutrality. Britain is treating us like a colony again. Now, Washington resists war. Rather than going to war, what does Washington do in response to Britain's violations of our neutrality, Josh? He sends an envoy to Britain to try to work out a treaty. The envoy is John Jay. The treaty is Jay's treaty. Now, Mandela, how is that treaty viewed? Is it a good one? No. It is not widely considered to be a good treaty by anyone. Now, the advantage of Jay's treaty was that it kept us out of war with England, which Washington understood was necessary. The disadvantage is the United States didn't get much, and France didn't like it very well. France didn't like it because they suggested that we had taken a bad treaty with England that was hurting them now. Oh, what was the treaty of, what was Pinckney's treaty? I mean, we talked about Jay's treaty, and we talked about, France not liking Jay's treaty and the Republicans not liking Jay's treaty. But what was Pinckney's treaty? What did that deal with? Go ahead, Andrew. Go ahead, Donnelly. Have you read that in the book yet? Oh my goodness, then you must. Yes, go.
That's a treaty with Spain that allowed them to...
Oh, so then it's a treaty with Spain that gave the United States the right to deposit cargo in New Orleans, and then free navigation of the Mississippi River. Maybe that's something we should know for the examination. Was there criticism of Jay's treaty within the United States? Was there criticism, Kelly, was there criticism of Jay's treaty in the United States? Who was critical of Jay's treaty, Kelly? What faction?
Republicans?
Yes, the Republicans were violently critical of Jay's treaty. The two most controversial events in Washington's administration were the Whiskey Rebellion and Jay's treaty. And both of these things are happening in '94. The Whiskey Rebellion was put down in the fall of '94. Jay's treaty was in the fall of '94. So both of these kind of significant actions on the part of Washington's administration are about the same time. I mean, it did seem like, to some, that the Federalists, led by George Washington, capitulated to a cowardly treaty in order to avoid war with England, but then sent an army of 13,000 to put down hardworking taxpayers who were resisting an unfair tax. And so the criticism of Washington began to intensify, which really leads to Washington saying that, look, I'm done with national politics. I won't seek re-election in 1796. It wasn't that he wouldn't seek re-election, it was that he would not accept the presidency had he been elected. So he says no. He sends to the newspapers in September of '96 a farewell address, which is memorable but for one warning that Washington offered. What was that warning that we said became a pillar of U.S. foreign policy? In his farewell address to the people, his valedictoria to the country, he says, look, I warn America, beware of what, dear Phillips? To entangling alliances with European powers. To permanent entangling alliances with European powers. Looking back at all that had happened as a result of America signing a treaty with the French, and all of the problems that had ensued with that, Washington says, look, don't do this again. Don't get involved in entangling alliances with European powers. I mean, one thing you could consider, I don't know what you wrote on your papers, but when Washington leaves office, is the idea of American neutrality, America's role in the world, solidified? Is Jay's Treaty enough? Well, you might argue, not to be critical of Washington, you could argue no. Look, if it was solidified, it wouldn't have returned in Jefferson's administration, which it did. But certainly Washington is out, and an election occurs in '96. And in that election of '96, it is Thomas Jefferson, now the icon of the Republican Party, as it was called, and John Adams, who is the vice president under Washington, and the person that the Federalists were supporting. Remember, we said that the Federalists, more than anything, really didn't think they had a party as much as that they were supporting the national government. Now, when Adams took office, he found the French were angry. Adams was elected, he defeated Jefferson in the first contested election in American history. When he took office, he found that the French were angry with the United States because of Jay's Treaty. And so what did they do? They started to harass our shipping. They started to impress our sailors. What did Adams do? He sent envoys over to try to make a deal. What was the French response to Adams' overture at trying to arrange a deal that would avoid war? What did we call the entire affair? Do you remember, Regina?
XYZ.
Oh, go ahead, Jesse.
XYZ.
The XYZ affair. How does the XYZ affair end, Fassetti?
They say that they're not going to pay France to negotiate with them.
So in the XYZ affair, ultimately the French refused to even meet with the American delegation until certain bribes were paid. America refuses to do this. No deal is reached. As a result of the XYZ affair, what happens between France and America? What happens? Yes. An undeclared naval war. An undeclared war between the French Navy and the American Navy, mostly in the Caribbean. Why doesn't that war eventually explode into a full-scale war? Why is there no full-scale war with France? Anybody? Maybe this is kind of a hard question. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead, Jay. Yeah. Well, we stuck with Adams. Adams, maybe Adams, and you said Adams decided to make peace. Adams was reluctant to extend the war. Adams was reluctant to expand the army. Adams looked for an opportunity to make peace, and when one appeared, he took it. And so despite the fact that it may have enhanced his popularity to drag out this undeclared war or to expand it into a full-scale war, Adams, when the opportunity arises to make peace, makes it. And so maybe Adams, he prides himself in being responsible for not taking the United States to war in 1800. Now, he might not pride himself for supporting some of the domestic initiatives that his party did during that undeclared period of war between France and the United States. And the most serious of those was the Alien and Sedition Acts. Now, what was the purpose of the Alien and Sedition Acts? When it was all said and done, what was the purpose of the Alien and Sedition Acts? We talked about what they were, series of laws. What was the purpose, Serena? Well, yeah, part of it was to make it more difficult for foreigners to become citizens and have influence in American politics. But on some level, go ahead, Josh. They said it was to protect national security by silencing dissent. All right? We need to quiet and quell the dissent from our government. I mean, remember, the Federalists were convinced that a conspiracy was afoot, that the French were going to invade and conspire with the no-good treasonous Republicans to overthrow the government and replace it with one that was sympathetic to French revolutionary ideas. Now, in order to protect this government, the Constitution, the national government from that, the traitors had to be silenced. So who was most likely to be arrested under the Sedition Act for being critical of the national government? Who was it targeted to? Yes. Yes, Republican newspaper editors were arrested and fined under the Sedition Act. What was the Republican response